Bring perspective to this topic, I'd like to welcome our Democratic strategist, Carlos Scott. Carlos, welcome back to BNC. It's always a pleasure having you. Now, let's get right to business.
Thank you.
Voting is a constitutional right. Why do you think that, it's becoming more of a partisan issue?
Well, it's taken out of the Trump playbook because all of these states have one thing in common. They're Republican-led. If you look at what happened in New York, as well as what's going on in Virginia, those are Democratic-led states, and so they're doing more to expand voting rights. Unfortunately, what's going on in Arizona, and I believe that is the 7th state, if I'm not correct, if I'm not wrong. So there's one common denominator in this Trumpism, as some people call them, Retrumpicans. And so we have to do more to get rid of these pretty much racist and restrictive voting rights that have been the most restrictive since probably the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, they call them Trumpettes. It's a play off of Muppets, like being controlled. Now, we just went over the Democratic-led states that are restoring voting rights to felons. Now, back in 2018, Florida voters actually approved an amendment that did the same thing. But leaders of the state added what's called a poll tax, or what some compared to be a poll tax, meaning parolees had to pay all fines before they could vote. What do you think the grounds for that was, and who do you think they were trying to disenfranchise?
To be perfectly honest and a little bit transparency, they were trying to be restrictive to people like my younger brother, who's unfortunately serving 60 years, 30 mandatory minimum in the state of Florida now. So once he becomes released, they'll have all these restrictive policies and basically like a poll tax like they had back in the 50s and 60s, where even though he's paid his debt to society, unfortunately, he'll have to pay some penalty, if you will, in order to vote. And that is not what the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed for. It was passed to make it available to pretty much to all of us.
Now, this is such a, when you put it side by side for constitutional law, some top political leaders blame President Trump, as you alluded to earlier, for perpetuating the big lie, which is what we still continue to hear over and over again, months into this new administration. This is obviously infringing on people's First Amendment right, but the fallout is affecting the constitutional right for free and open elections. Explain the legal challenges here.
Well, the biggest legal challenge is that a lot of Americans don't understand is, even though this is the United States of America and there's a federal government, all states, the elections are ran locally from the state all the way down to the counties and so forth. So there's a lot of things that are in place or that are not in place that unfortunately is left upon the jurisdiction. And that caveat is what's really causing us to go through what they're going through right now. And I'm sure you guys have reported on it, what's going on in Arizona, where a non-government entity is actually in the middle of recounting ballots. I mean, I don't even know where to start from the standpoint of violation of privacy, just jurisdiction. I mean, that is a hot mess. And so now the Democratic lawmakers as well as Democratic lawyers are suing to try to get the Supreme Court to rush and make a decision to try to take that back.
And Carlos, just to piggyback off of that, I mean, what is also considered a hot mess is the fact that they're trying to recount the votes again. I mean, this is after dozens, if I'm not mistaken, upwards of 60 different courts. I mean, even Trump-appointed judges have said, okay, there was no voter fraud, the election's over, it's a done deal. But when you still have lawmakers pushing this big lie, I mean, I have to say, if I were a Trump supporter, I would believe it. Because if the person that I elected for my district is telling me that my vote was stolen from me, I mean, what do you believe? So basically, my question for you is, the HR 1 for the People Act passed in the House. It has an uphill battle in the Senate. Can you just talk about why it's important for this bill to see the light of day?
it's important for the light of day because we need equal access. John Lewis was willing to give his life for as long as he was, for over 60, 70 years, that he was a civil rights icon. And without the passage of this bill, we pretty much are back to pre-1965 in some of these jurisdictions. And we shouldn't have to actually take it to the Supreme Court
Carlos,
to be able to, yes.
I am so sorry, sir. We've been following breaking news with the CDC, and we have to go to Washington now.